Mr. Speaker, will you please call the House to order?
The bill is passed.
We'd like to get a budget that represents the interests of the people who are standing here with me now.
To be part of the struggle to achieve a better society for all.
Who here in this chamber feels that their children should be punished for something that they did? Hi, and welcome to Assembly Update. I'm Assemblyman Phil Ramos, and I represent the towns of Brentwood, Bayshore, and Central Islip. A very diverse community, and a community who is struggling with some of the issues of funding when it comes to education and many other areas of the state budget. And today I have two wonderful guests that I decided to put on the show because I saw them up here in Albany working to advocate for the community, and I wanted them to come on and talk a little bit about the issues as they see it and how they are advocating for the education of our children. We have with us today Julie Burgos, who is a social worker, was a social worker in the Brentwood schools for 27 years? 28 years. If anybody knows about the issues of our schools, it's Julie Burgos. She's also a founding member of the Latina Teachers Association, a community activist, somebody who's well known, no stranger to our community. We have Maria Gonzalez-Prescod. She is the vice president of the PTA of what school? Southwest, a graduate of Buffalo. SUNY Buffalo. And another activist who's been working, advocating for our children. We frequently see her in anything having to do with education, and also providing a lot of extracurricular activities for the kids, helping work out events, present events for the students like fashion shows and many other things. I want to welcome you both.
Thank you.
And thank you. And you know, I know you didn't plan to be on this show, but I saw you up here, fighting the good fight, meeting with people, and it's just something very unusual to see residents from Brentwood actually come up here and take part in the legislative process, but in a real way. I'm talking about behind the scenes. I think most people will meet with their elected officials. They'll meet with their assemblymen, with different elected officials, and talk about their needs. But very few actually come up here and take part in the actual mechanics of advocating for the children. And by saying mechanics, I mean not just speaking with the elected officials. I mean sitting down with staff, integral staff up here that works with the school budget, people from Ways and Means, people from Education Committee. These are the real policy makers behind the scenes. As elected officials, we talk about our ideas. It's the staff that actually makes it happen, researches the law, tells us what's doable, what isn't, and tries to put together a concept into something real. And that is who you two were meeting with today. Yes. So you met with Ways and Means and the Education Committee staff. And what were some of the issues that you went over today?
Well, we talked about the impact that the loss of foundation aid has on our districts. A district like Brentwood that has such a diverse population. We have a high population of ELL students, students who dominate a language other than English, and we have an increasing population in that area. So instead of having less money, we really should be getting more money to meet the needs of these students.
Well, let's backtrack a little, so for the purpose of the viewers to understand the issue of foundation aid. And I always go around saying that there is really a disparity built into the way that we fund schools. If we're going to fund schools based on the values of homes, then logic would tell you that the homes in a poor community are worth less, and therefore those students will have less money because people are paying less taxes on their home by virtue of the value, the low value. So those schools will have less money. Then a wealthy area that has millionaire mansions is going to have a windfall of money for their schools. And so as a result, we have many of our schools, kids may be going on school trips to the Bronx Zoo, and we have wealthy districts where kids are going on school trips to France and Europe. And it just widens that achievement gap. So foundation aid was created to even the playing field, so that if a community is a millionaire community and has a really good tax base and a windfall of money, and a poor community does not because of the low home value, foundation aid makes up that gap. There's more money coming from the state, not the homeowner, more money coming from the state that makes up for that disparity. And that's been eliminated. It was in place for a while, but then they eliminated it due to the economic crisis. So those are things, Maria, that you guys are fighting to implement again, right? Because I mean, do you know what the impact would be on Brentwood schools if we?
It would be a very big impact because of the fact that we count on this money to provide services for our children. If we don't have, Brentwood is currently owed $100 million.
$100 million
which is
through foundation aid.
through
That's the
foundation
impact that
aid.
it would have.
And our combined health wealth ratio is 0.34, so we are a low-income district. And that means that, we don't have the tax base. We need, state funding to provide services.
Something interesting, you talked about the ratio. Now, one problem that I see up here is that statistics and the formulas for funding don't isolate the ratio of Brentwood per se. They look at Long Island-wide statistics.
Right.
An island where you have very super rich people, and then you have poor people, so that when you have a median income, but the wealth is in the hands of a few. So when you look at the median income and the formulas that provide funding, they're based on a false read.
Correct.
They're based on incorrect assumptions that the majority of people or the average person is making this, and they're not. And that makes, not only in schooling, but with other benefits, for instance, child care from the government and many other things, people are not eligible based on these false reads on these formulas. So you guys were here talking to actually the policymakers and making them aware of these discrepancies?
We have, and we did, and again, our school district is lacking funds from the state, from the federal government, and it trickles back down to the students. We're losing programs, we're losing art, we're losing after-school programs, and we need those programs. We currently lost 5 children in our community this past year, and I think that we need to keep our children, safe for one thing, but also keep them active. We provide them just a basic education. We need to provide them, with other things in regards to like the other schools do. If you go and talk to wealth districts like Dix Hills, they provide more than what we provide for our children.
Yeah, and in a poor district, again, I always draw a parallel. These after-school programs are not really disposable. People think that when we have tight budgets, okay, get rid of this class and this group or this sport activity, and that's where we'll make cuts. But when we do that in a poor district like ours, you end up with social issues that the taxpayer ends up paying either way. So we have to provide these things, because then we have an increase in crime. We have kids with idle time. We have kids not involved in constructive activities. So those programs mean so much more in a communities like ours. But in the wealthier communities, they have all those. And even if they did make a cut, mom and dad have the money to put their kids in private violin classes or something like that. We don't. So it's so important that we make these things a priority, as well as the basic education.
And I think we need to also, educate the whole child, socially, emotionally. We need guidance counselors, and we currently have 1 guidance counselor to 400 children.
400. And so a child in high school who's preparing to go to college has to fight for the guidance counselor's attention with 400 other students.
And this is, that's not good. I remember I grew up very poor, and I looked for the guidance counselors to guide me. I went to college. Thank God I went to college because of them. They were able to be there for me and guide me.
But you didn't have to compete with 400 students,
I did not have to
right?
compete with 400 students.
Yeah, just to get a slot in to be able to talk about your future.
Exactly.
And I find that a lot of our students, one of the obstacles to them getting into higher education, they just have no idea how to start college, what to do, what career to pursue. And I have even seen students who end up in college who end up getting degrees in things for which there's no jobs. And that's a lack of guidance.
Part of what we have to do is prepare the students during the school time too. It's good to have the after school, but we're not really giving them the most appropriate, education that they can get, because we don't have the sources to do it. We don't have the AP classes that other districts have. We have some, but not the same number of AP classes. We don't offer the same number of electives. We've had alternative schools in the past, and we're working on some, but it's not something that we really have the money to do in order to give them everything they need.
Yeah, I noticed up here in the Assembly when we're negotiating a budget, they keep playing one zone against the other. In other words, you hear a lot of talk about New York City gets this funding and Long Island is not getting their share. The issue is not so much that Long Island is not getting their share. The issue is that the share is not going where it's needed. In other words, a wealthier district doesn't need to get the equal share if they don't have that same issue there. You know, the funding should go where the needs are. If, for instance, Brentwood gets special funding for a certain amount of non-English speakers, it doesn't mean that a wealthy district should be getting the same or equal funding or their share, because it doesn't exist
They
there.
don't have the same expense.
Yeah, we don't guarantee anybody a windfall.
Right.
We guarantee an adequate education based on the need.
Right. We also have to educate, I'm sorry, Maria, based on the New York State Ed regulations. So even if we don't have the money, we still have to follow those regs. So if the regulation comes down that you have to provide ESL, for example, for X number of students, we have to do it regardless. So now the teachers, you know, have to have the larger class sizes. The students have to be in larger class
Which does a
sizes.
disservice to the teacher and the student.
Yes.
Because now they have to share
Yeah,
time,
and it's
you know, and
inequitable.
it's more difficult. Yeah.
And it's very sad, you know, we in Brentwood, like just this past month in January, we had 350 additional students that came in to be enrolled and register in our district. You know, and with a district that we're already lacking, you know, space to put these children in, you know, and we...
We're probably growing faster than any other community on Long Island.
Of course. You know, and we definitely need, you know, the money to follow these children, you know, these new, you know, children that are coming into our district.
There's also a cash flow problem. I know that a lot of funding comes in 2-year increments.
Yes.
So you get an influx of 300 students. You don't get that for like 2 years down the road sometimes.
And we need that money now, you know, actually
That's-
yesterday.
You have to pay the
That's the
teachers.
problem with the
You have to-
unaccompanied minors.
Right.
You know, some people, you know, misunderstand the issue. Some people say, well, the unaccompanied minors, there's no money following them.
Right.
There is money following them. I mean, if a student comes from Guatemala or if a student comes from California, that school will get extra funding for that student. The problem is they get it in 2-year increments. So if we all of a sudden are forced to absorb 500 new students in one shot, we don't get that money for 2 years from now. And then what happens is we have to cut something in order to provide for them now. So it's more of a cash flow issue that the federal government should have dealt with. You know, we owe these kids an education. I'm not one who wants to scapegoat them. We should not. These are human beings, and we should provide an education for them.
And then the support services that go along with that
right.
also.
They
Because
go
Maria
along, right.
mentioned the guidance counselors, but I can tell you as a social worker that when I retired, I was one of 5 in the whole district. And the district at that time had 18.
In the whole district?
In the whole
And
district.
we're talking a district of 19,000 students.
Yes, it was like
5
18
social
almost.
workers.
Yes.
And
So-
you know, these unaccompanied minors are coming with social issues. You know, they have they're very needy, and they need, you know, social workers to help them.
I mean, some of them have faced separation from their families, and you can imagine how traumatic that is for any child. And so yes, but again, we're a humane country and a humane district. But the government should provide it. If the federal government said, you know, place them here because they had no parents, they had no family, and everything, there should be some funds to help you with that cash flow problem.
Traditionally, for example, the social worker's job, I was going to say reduced really to servicing our primary function in the school district is servicing the special education students. So we do the intakes, the updates, you know, and the social histories and counseling. We didn't have the backup to be able to provide adequate crisis intervention services, for example, in all of the schools. With 5 social workers and 17 buildings, it's just not possible.
it's not
so the
enough,
teachers
you know?
pick up the slack.
Right.
Because when
Yeah,
you
no,
don't have the
teachers
support
work
services, the
magic
teachers
with
have,
what they have,
they
you know?
really do.
But again, I think it's really commendable that you're both here in Albany doing this work. This is something, for me, I was surprised to see the work that you're doing behind the scenes. Most of our residents really don't roll up their sleeves and come into the mechanism of funding of school budgets, and I hope we see more of this. I know you're both leaders, and more will follow. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for all you do.
Thank you.